Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling those crazy tech layoffs and what they mean for the Silicon Valley housing market.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty wild to think that one of the most expensive places to live
Right.
could actually become attainable for more people,
Yeah.
all thanks to these layoffs.
Mm-hmm.
So to really get into this, we're going to be looking at a podcast episode that really dug deep on this topic.
Okay. Sounds good.
Let's get right to it then. The first thing that really stood out was just how many people are being laid off.
Yeah, it is pretty staggering.
Right.
Like, we're talking tens of thousands across companies like Meta,
Oh, yeah.
Amazon. Even those smaller startups are taking a hit.
Yeah, the podcast said that Meta alone let go of over 21,000 people,
Wow.
and Amazon was right behind them at 27,000.
A lot of folks.
That's a huge chunk of the workforce, and
Yeah.
especially in Silicon Valley where tech is like the heart of everything.
Right. It's the backbone of the economy.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So these layoffs, they're bound to have a ripple effect on the housing market.
Oh, absolutely. Silicon Valley's housing market is so closely tied to the tech industry.
It makes sense.
You know, with the high salaries, the stock options, all the bonuses.
Right.
That's what's been driving the insane demand for housing.
Yeah.
So when those things go away or when they start to shrink,
Yeah.
we're going to see some big changes.
Yeah, it's like this domino effect. And
Yeah.
the first domino to fall seems to be people actually leaving Silicon Valley.
Yeah, they're heading out.
Did the podcast talk about that?
Yeah, they did. They mentioned a lot of folks moving to places that are more affordable,
I can see that.
you know, taking advantage of remote work
Makes sense.
to live in cheaper cities.
Yeah.
And so when all those people leave, that means less demand for housing in Silicon Valley.
Right.
And that's what could start pushing prices down.
That's got to be good news for people renting.
Yeah.
I've heard stories about landlords getting desperate
Oh,
to
yeah.
fill their places.
They're really struggling.
What kind of deals are they offering?
Well, the podcast mentioned a bunch of incentives landlords are trying,
Yeah.
like reduced rent,
Okay.
couple months rent free,
Wow.
even lowering security deposits,
Really?
which is something to think about if you're looking to rent in the area.
Definitely something to keep in mind.
Landlords are really having to work hard to find tenants these days.
It doesn't sound like it's all sunshine and rainbows for them, though.
Not really.
Even with those incentives, they're still struggling with vacancies.
You're right. It's a tough spot for them.
Yeah.
They're trying to attract renters, but all those empty units are eating into their profits.
Right.
It's a delicate balance for sure.
So things are maybe looking up for renters, but what about the folks who own homes in Silicon Valley?
Ooh, that's a good question.
With mortgage rates as high as they are, I can't imagine it's easy for them.
No, it's definitely not. The podcast mentioned those rates are hovering around 7-8%.
Ooh.
That's a serious expense.
Yeah, even for people who still have their jobs.
Right. It's definitely making people think twice about buying a new place.
Hmm.
Or even upgrading to something bigger.
Right. And for the folks who were laid off, especially those who were banking on big payouts from stock options,
Oh, yeah.
they might be forced to sell.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. The podcast even talked about how this could really impact specific neighborhoods,
Oh, interesting.
like Cupertino, Palo Alto,
Okay.
Mountain View, places you're interested in.
Exactly.
They said if more homes go up for sale in those desirable areas,
Yeah.
it could be a good opportunity.
So we've got less demand from both renters and homeowners,
It seems like it.
which kind of sounds like it could be the perfect time to buy in Silicon Valley.
You're catching on quick.
Uh-huh.
It really seems like the tides are turning,
Right.
and that balance of power is shifting.
Towards the buyer.
Exactly. Buyers have more leverage now.
Okay.
They can negotiate things like lower prices,
Mm-hmm.
credits to cover closing costs,
Wow.
contingencies in their offers.
Things that were unheard of just a couple years ago.
Yeah, you wouldn't even think about it back then.
So what about the people trying to sell their homes?
Oh, it's not easy for them right now.
No.
The podcast said there's way more competition among sellers now.
Interesting.
Houses are sitting on the market for longer,
Oh, wow.
and they're having to be more realistic about their prices.
So it's not the crazy, fast-paced, high-priced market we saw at the peak?
Not at all.
So it really does seem like a golden opportunity for buyers.
It could be.
But is this just temporary, or is this like a sign of something bigger?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And the podcast actually offered some thoughts on those long-term impacts.
Oh, so what did they say?
Well, that's a great question. It's fascinating, actually, because they said even though these layoffs are causing like some serious shakeups,
Yeah.
Silicon Valley's got some core strengths that aren't going anywhere.
So it's not like the end of the tech boom or anything.
It doesn't seem like it. The experts on the podcast really stress that the tech industry, it goes in cycles.
Right.
There are going to be ups and downs always.
Right.
But that drive to innovate, to invest in new tech,
Right.
that's not going away.
No.
So once the economy kind of levels out,
Yeah.
we can probably expect the job market and the housing market to recover too.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Silicon Valley has always been at the forefront
Oh, yeah.
of the tech world.
Leading the way.
It's hard to picture it losing its appeal completely.
I agree. And on top of that,
Yeah.
there's this constant housing shortage in Silicon Valley.
Oh, right.
Even with demand dipping a bit,
Yeah.
there just aren't enough homes to meet the area's needs in the long run.
Right.
That lack of supply is going to keep pushing those prices up over time.
So we've got that cyclical nature of the tech world,
Mm-hmm.
that constant lack of housing,
Yeah.
all pointing towards a potential rebound.
Mm-hmm.
But the podcast also mentioned something about remote work, maybe changing things up.
Yes, remote work, that's the big wild card here.
How so?
Well, if more tech companies decide to stick with hybrid or even fully remote work,
Right.
it could have a huge impact on where people decide to call home.
Yeah, people aren't tied to Silicon Valley for their jobs.
Exactly.
They might choose to live in more affordable suburbs
Mm-hmm.
or even move out of the Bay Area entirely.
Right, and that shift in where people are living could really shake things up.
I can see that.
Some areas might see prices go down,
Right.
while others experience a surge in demand.
And higher prices.
Exactly.
No.
It's definitely a trend worth paying attention to.
Wow. There's so much to think about here.
A lot of layers.
We've talked about layoffs, shifting demand,
Mm-hmm.
potential risks, and exciting opportunities.
It's a mixed bag for sure.
If you had to sum it all up,
Okay.
what are the key takeaways for our listener today?
I think the biggest takeaway is that connection between the tech industry and the housing market in Silicon Valley.
They're intertwined.
Yeah, what happens in one directly affects the other. They're like two sides of the same coin.
And for someone who wants to get into the market,
Mm-hmm.
whether they're buying or renting,
Yeah.
this uncertain time could actually be a good thing.
Oh, absolutely. For buyers, they might have more power to negotiate now.
Okay.
And could maybe get a place at a price that wouldn't have been possible before.
Right. And for renters,
Yeah,
this could be their chance to snag those great incentives we were talking about.
right. And lock in a more affordable lease.
It's not all about taking advantage of the situation, though, is it?
No, of course not.
We got to remember that these layoffs are impacting real people,
Right.
families.
It's a tough time for a lot of folks.
It is. So even though there might be some good opportunities out there,
Mhm.
it's important to be sensitive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have to remember the human side of all of this.
Yeah. While we're talking about market trends,
Right.
there are real people dealing with a lot of uncertainty.
Exactly.
So, yeah, maybe there are opportunities, but we got to approach it with understanding.
For sure. And as we look ahead,
Mhm.
it's also good to remember that Silicon Valley has always been resilient.
Yeah, even when facing setbacks, it always seems to bounce back.
It finds a way to reinvent itself.
Exactly. So what's happening now is kind of like a unique glimpse into how this housing market works.
Mm-hmm.
But the long-term future of Silicon Valley, it's still tied to that innovative spirit.
Yeah, that's what defines it.
I think that's a great point to end on.
I agree.
This deep dive has given us so much to think about.
It really has.
From the impact of those tech layoffs
Mm-hmm.
to those potential opportunities for buyers and renters.
Absolutely. It's been a journey.
For sure.
Yeah.
And for you listening in,
Yeah,
now might be a good time to start digging deeper into those neighborhoods you're interested in.
absolutely. You mentioned Cupertino, Palo Alto, Mountain View.
Right. Those are all great areas.
They are, but each one's got its own vibe.
Its own character.
Exactly. Understanding how each one is being affected by these market shifts.
Yeah.
That's key.
Yeah.
You're looking for a place to live.
Right.
You got to find the right fit.
It's not just about the big picture trends.
It's not. It's about how those trends play out on a smaller scale.
Right. In those specific neighborhoods.
Exactly. Looking into recent sales data,
Okay.
checking out how much is available, maybe even talking to local real estate agents,
Yeah.
that could give you a real edge.
Great ideas.
Yeah.
I think this deep dive has given us a solid foundation,
I think so too.
but the real work starts when you zoom in on those areas you're interested in.
Absolutely. And here's something else to remember. Silicon Valley is constantly changing.
Oh, for sure.
What's true today might not be true tomorrow.
Yeah.
Staying informed and being ready to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important.
Especially in a market like this.
It's so dynamic.
Adaptability is key.
I like that.
Who knows? Maybe all of this will actually lead to a more balanced
Yeah.
and accessible Silicon Valley housing market,
That would be great.
a place that works for both longtime residents and people who are new to the area.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. It's definitely possible.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen how Silicon Valley is amazing at turning challenges into opportunity.
It always has.
So maybe this is what it takes to create a future that's more inclusive and sustainable.
Well, on that hopeful note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
We covered a lot of ground today.
We did.
From the impact of those tech layoffs to those potential opportunities for buyers and renters.
Right.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. And for everyone listening in,
Yes.
I hope you've gained some valuable insights.
For sure.
Remember, knowledge is power.
Especially when you're trying to figure out something as complex as the Silicon Valley housing market.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Silicon Valley housing market.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.
And remember, knowledge is power. Use it wisely. Yeah, those are all excellent areas. But each one has its own unique character. Understanding how each neighborhood is being affected by all of these market shifts is key. Don't forget, you're looking for a place to live. You need to find the right fit.
Right. It's not just about the big picture trends, but how those trends play out on a smaller scale.
Exactly. Each neighborhood has its own mix of housing types, its own price points, its own vibe. Looking into recent sales data, checking out how much inventory is available, and maybe even talking to some local real estate agents could really give you an advantage.
That's a great idea. I think this deep dive has given us a solid foundation, but it's clear that the real work begins when you start focusing on specific neighborhoods.
Absolutely. And here's something else to keep in mind. Silicon Valley is constantly changing. What's true today might not be true tomorrow. Staying informed and being ready to adapt is really important, especially in a market that's as dynamic as this one.
I love that adaptability. That's the key. Who knows? Maybe this whole shakeup will ultimately lead to a Silicon Valley housing market that's more balanced and accessible, a place that works for both longtime residents and people who are new to the area.
That's a really interesting thought. It's definitely possible. We've seen how Silicon Valley is great at turning challenges into opportunities. So maybe this is what it takes to create a future for this region that's more inclusive and sustainable.
Well, on that hopeful note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the impact of those tech layoffs to the potential opportunities for both buyers and renters. It's been quite a journey.
It really has. And for you listening in, I hope you've gained some valuable insights. Remember, knowledge is power, especially when you're trying to figure out something as complex as the Silicon Valley housing market.
I couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Silicon Valley housing market. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.
And remember, knowledge is power. Use it wisely.